Is Sly Cooper good in 2024? That's the answer we are looking for on this edition of Game Pass Plus and Beyond, coming right up. RACCOONUS. What is up, everyone? It's Taylor here from RACCOONUS, and you've heard the question earlier, is Sly Cooper good in 2024? Most notably, Sly Cooper in the THIEVIUS RACCOONUS. Now, for those who don't know, Sly Cooper is a game that came out way a long time ago, back in the early 2000s on PlayStation 2, developed by Sucker Punch, the makers of Ghost of Tsushima. They also made the infamous games, which are very, very good, and I might talk about those in the future, but today we're focusing solely on Sly Cooper and the THIEVIUS RACCOONUS. Now, this is the first game of the quadrilogy, I guess. I just classify it as the trilogy because of the fact that I never really played the fourth game and I had a lot of bias towards it when it came out back in like 2013. So I decided to go through them all again just to see how they're doing. So we're going to break this up into different categories. The first category is going to be gameplay. Now, gameplay for this game is actually incredibly simple. It came out at a time where platformers still dominated. We're starting to see themselves on the way out. The ways of Crash and Spyro were slowly starting to seep away for games like Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter. Both of those games, which I would still classify kind of as platformers, but more into the action adventure style of gaming. Eventually, Jak and Daxter would take a completely 180 turn into more of a Grand Theft Auto style game, while Ratchet and Clank doubled down on the action into a more combat-based type of game. Sly Cooper, however, did not do such things later on, but they were able to kind of redefine their games into something that I would say is much, much better. However, the first game isn't like that. The first game is very much, I kind of classify it as a Crash Bandicoot clone in some ways, especially in terms of the gameplay. First game is what I like to call hallway kind of gameplay, where you're really just going from one side of the hall to the other, collecting bottles and taking on maybe 4 to 5 enemies at a time at most. The feeling of being a thief is really not much there, especially for Sly, who is a thief. He is a raccoon thief. And so when you're playing this, it doesn't feel like you're a thief much at all. To an extent, it does make sense. I know that the company was probably very, very worried about this game and how they were going to make it. So playing it a little more safe, I would definitely say, is the smarter route. Now, in this game, you really only use 3 buttons for the most part. There is the square button to attack, the jump button with X, and circle button pretty much does everything else. Everything else by meaning of, if you need to crawl, you'll use the circle button. If you need to shimmy along a rail or something, you'll use the circle button. If you need to jump on some sort of point, you will use the circle button. This game is kid-friendly, so kid-friendly that someone like Dean Takahashi might actually be able to beat the tutorial. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The game is designed for kids. It's definitely designed for kids, but I would say that it is a bit oversimplistic in some regards. You do get some really cool little bonus abilities later on as you collect clue bottles. You'll collect clue bottles in these hallway areas, and they will unlock pages of the THIEVIUS RACCOONUS that give you certain abilities, whether it's slowing down time, speeding up time, using a sort of dive-like technique, or even tossing your hat as a mine. It is kind of fun in a way, but definitely the abilities are pretty much all useless in the game except for little bonuses. My personal favorite is the roll because it's what I used most and it just allowed me to speed through the game faster. Every once in a while you'll come across an enemy and by giving him a good whack with your cane, you'll basically take them out in one shot. Enemies don't really move from the spots that they're in, and it is beyond bare bones. Now, I'm not saying, again, that is not a bad thing, especially for that time period. That's very much like a Crash or something like that, but it doesn't necessarily make the game very engaging. Moving on to something a little more like boss fights. Boss fights are a little more unique. Some of the boss fights, such as Raleigh and Mugshot, are fairly simple. Same with the Panda King. However, someone, especially in this collection set, I did notice an issue when it came to Miss Ruby. So during the fight with Miss Ruby, you have to time your button presses as you miss her quote-unquote voodoo magic. However, sometimes the button presses are just off. They are not in rhythm. And because of that, I died many a times trying to get through this. Now, this could just be because it's on a collection set, because I don't remember this happening on the PS2. So it could have just been a port issue you, but it definitely made the game way more frustrating because for some reason the developers decided that you are not going to get a health bar, and instead you are going to get horseshoes. Now these horseshoes allow you to take a hit. Normally if Sly gets hit once, he is instantly dead. However, if you have a lucky horseshoe, you can survive 1 hit or 2 hits depending on how many horseshoes you have. You can hold 2 horseshoes max. If that sounds incredibly stupid, it is. And they do change it in the sequel, thank goodness, because that is a terrible decision and people should never be doing that. However, it still doesn't help that that boss fight is incredibly frustrating. This game also loves minigames. They love minigames for some reason. Back in the day, oh my god, I sound like a boomer. Anyways, back in the day when games were being made, especially like platformers and kid games, they liked introducing mini games to make it, a little more fun, more diverse in the gameplay. However, that doesn't really come out in this game. A lot of the mini games are incredibly frustrating. They're really just not fun. One of your first mini games is to collect treasure chests and not let the crabs take the treasure chests back into their little holes that they have to go back into for some reason. Another mission has you kill 50 chickens while other chickens are chasing you down and trying to blow you up. Now, is that funny? Absolutely. Is it also incredibly what? Yes. And due to the fact that I'm dealing with anthropomorphic animals, this also leads to a lot of confusion that I don't want to get into. Overall, the gameplay section of it is still a good time. As much as I can rip on it and kind of critique it nowadays, back then when I was a kid, I had a lot of fun with it and I didn't think too much about it. So gameplay, if you can suffer through some of the mini games and stuff, I'd still say it's a go. Now, the highlight of this game are the story and characters. My story is not very overly complex. I will be honest with that. The story in a nutshell goes about with Sly was the son of this famous master thief who's from a long line of other master thieves. Now, one day, these group known as the Fiendish Five come in and absolutely unalive his father, and eventually Sly gets sent to an orphanage where he meets Bentley and Murray, his best friends and cohorts in crime. After they leave the orphanage, they decide to go and collect the pages of the THIEVIUS RACCOONUS back. Now, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it's actually a very simplistic story. However, the characters are what drive the story, and that is a highlight 100%. Sly is by far one of the best characters came out during that year, and out of the big 3, I would say he is the best character out of that big 3 era of the PS2. And by big 3, I do mean Sly, Ratchet and Clank, and Jak and Daxter. Sly has a bit of an edge to him. He's a thief. He knows he's good at what he does. He's very suave, especially when talking to someone like Carmelita. Oh, and we'll get to Carmelita. He jokes around a lot and shoots a lot of crap with Bentley, and he does have a bit of a... However, his conversations with Murray feel a little bit lacking. They definitely, you can tell they didn't really know what to do with Murray the hippo, but it's still pretty good nonetheless. Sly's conversations with his nemesis, his bosses, the Fiendish Five, are definitely one of the highlights. He does not take crap from them, and it shows. He is straightforward, very to the point, and he's not going to let them bully him around, which is totally worth it. Seeing him talk crap to the people who murdered his father feels kind of satisfying. It feels well deserved. Now, the last thing I do want to talk about is his relationship with Carmelita. Carmelita Fox is the head of Interpol and has been trying to catch Sly for assumingly been a long time. He mentions it even in the very beginning, and they do have a very flirtatious relationship back and forth. Sly definitely gets under Carmelita's skin, and it's very suave. Like, the way that he talks to her is super flirtatious, yet is still in a way where you can tell she buys it. It's kind of a fun relationship between the two, and one that is much more playful, but still enjoyable to hear nonetheless. Last thing I'm going to touch on is the presentation, and I would say out of all 3 of the big 3, which I'm going to compare it to, which is Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Sly Cooper, this one has the most stylized version. The game feels like you are in a comic book, and that works perfectly for this kind of game. Sly is an anthropomorphic raccoon, Carmelita is a fox, Bentley is a turtle, Murray is a hippo, and in a world that feels more like a cartoon, it fits for this. Music and sound effects are also amazing in this. Every time you do a stealth action, you'll make a sound, especially when you're sneaking along railings and walls. That kind of stuff always gets to me. On top of it, the music behind it, the background music, always feels unique yet true to the area that you're in. All in all, Sly Cooper and the THIEVIUS RACCOONUS was a fun time, no matter what I say about it. Now, would I say, is this game still good in 2024? Yes, with an asterisk. If you can get through the mini games and the issue that happened with me when I was playing against Ruby, then I think you'll be totally fine and you'll find a lot of enjoyment in this. However, like I said, the mini games are one that definitely take away from this game and do make it a little bit more difficult to play. However, the story and characters, witty dialogue definitely make it worth your time. You can find Sly Cooper and the THIEVIUS RACCOONUS in the Sly collection on PlayStation Plus. Now, I'll turn my attention to y'all. What did you think of this game? Have you ever played Sly Cooper and the THIEVIUS RACCOONUS? Let me know what you thought about it. Be sure to check out all of my socials down in the description and make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good jazz. All that being said, I'm Taylor from AfrofishOG and I will catch you all in the next one.